My name is Faisal Devji and I'm Professor of Indian History at the University of Oxford. Welcome to my exp. In a funny way, the modern history of Islam results in the devastation of Muslim authority. Islam, as a proper name, becomes part of a free-for-all where anyone can try to claim it. And one of the things we see in contemporary movements in the Muslim world is the effort of different kinds of people to claim authority over this proper name, which I am arguing is quite a new phenomenon in Muslim history. Now, in the 19th century, in colonial times, it was often Western-educated Muslims who wanted to reform Islam who laid claim to such an authority over this new term Islam. Today, it is as much militants and terrorists who make this claim. And these are also people who go without the traditional training and expertise that had once characterized these distinct lines of authority. When you think about violence in modern Muslim thought, you notice, or at least I notice, something rather distinctive, that it tends to name not the theological element in these thoughts and practices, but rather what doesn't have theological character. Let me give you an example. So if we take those forms of violence that have become very commonplace since 1989, when Salman Rushdie's novel, The Satanic Verses, was criticized for insulting Muhammad, for insulting the Muslim prophet, and as we know, gave rise to demonstrations first, very interestingly, in this country, in Great Britain, and then moving on to other Western countries, finally to India and Pakistan, and then to the rest of the Muslim world. Since 1989, we have seen any number of acts of protest and violence over or at insults alleged to be delivered to the person of Muhammad. Now, what is interesting about this violence is that it cannot really justify itself theologically. How is that? When you look, and it's the same language that is being used from 1989 until today, from Rushdie to the recent murder of Samuel Paty in France. Muhammad is like my father or my uncle or my relative. I feel humiliated when he's insulted. There should be a law that protects Muhammad in the same way as there are laws against libel and defamation. Right? So this language is entirely, if you will, secular in content. Right? There's no theological claim being made, nor can there be a theological claim be made at all, because in a lot of modern Muslim thought, what has happened is that Muhammad has been increasingly humanized. He's been humanized in the same way that Jesus, for instance, was from the 19th century, indeed earlier, 17th and 18th century, increasingly humanized for European Christianity. He's humanized in order to protect or preserve the theological privilege that belongs only to God. Only God can be divine. And Muhammad is not meant to be divine. And therefore, the traditional views and visions of Muhammad as someone who could somehow enter your dream and bring you comfort or perform miracles from his grave, etc. These things have steadily been winnowed away. And what you have is a more and more human figure who can therefore be insulted. He has suddenly become vulnerable to insult. There is no language any longer to describe Muhammad. Precisely because it's been stripped of his old theological character, he must only be understood in these familiar ways, all too familiar ways, as a relative, as someone who has been insulted. So the only theological term that is used for Muhammad as a figure who needs to be protected from insult is the European and Christian word blasphemy. And it is a term that is explicitly and deliberately taken from Christianity. In the days of the Rushdie affair, of course, what Muslims are claiming was that Muhammad needs to be protected by the laws of blasphemy that at the time were still on the books in England. They have since been removed. So you have to go through the West and through Christianity in order to protect Muhammad, because Islam, even though it does have a theological language, of course, in the past, that language cannot be mobilized for the Prophet. Now, what I want to suggest, therefore, is that violence comes to serve as a displacement or a replacement for the theological. The theological language that no longer applies or no longer exists.